Thanks for dimming the lights. The passage I have for us out of God's Word today that He's given me throughout this mission came out of Romans chapter 10. Paul writing to the church at Rome, in verse 9 it says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. That was the bottom line I had to tell people. That was it. And there weren't a lot of excuses. It was received. But the reason for this mission came about further down in verse 13. For whoever will call on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on Him in whom they have not believed? How will they believe in Him whom they have not heard? And how will they hear without a preacher? How will they preach unless they are sent? Just as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news of good things. And that's what the mission was about. Our church went on mission. You sent me as an emissary representing you, our church, to people you have not met. You've seen them in pictures. We've talked about them. We give offerings to Tanzania here in this box. And that was the culmination of a lot of what happened there. It was 22 days long. And what I've got for you today is just a brief synopsis, because I could, as you know, I'm long-winded. I could go forever. I could tell you about the food, the culture, the music, all kinds of things. But I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what happened over that 22-day period. The biggest thing that I want you to take away is that people who were captive were set free. People who were in the bondage and slavery of sin were freed. And souls were saved. People were healed. And the gospel was heard. There were babies who were dedicated. There were young men who surrendered to the ministry. And lives were changed. Because somebody, you, 17,000 kilometers away, loved them. It was simple. Statistically, I tried to report as often as I could. But all in total, there were 427 presentations of the gospel. That's how you lose your voice. 292 souls were saved to Jesus Christ in 22 days. Not all by me, but the teams. Okay? 46 were baptized. I got to baptize 46. 2 of those baptisms were by witnessing the baptism and the message and saying, I believe in Jesus and I want to be saved. Prayed the prayer right there, got baptized. This happened in the water. She climbed down the stairs in one of the baptistries, not in the lake, climbed down in the baptistry, which is just a cement hole. It was like a cistern. And professed Jesus Christ standing half in the water. And in this 30 seconds later was baptized. It was that quick, that simple. 60 seconds later, her sister standing outside saw her do it. I believe in Jesus. Come on. And just that we went through this back in April and May about why we baptize. It is an outward symbol. It is a testimony. That was living proof right there for me. So it started on May the 7th. It took 3+ days, 4 days to get to the destination. As usual, traveled by plane and bus and car and boat. This is the team. There were 6 of us from the Johnson County Southwest Metroplex Baptist Association. The director of mission and his wife, they had been missionaries in Tanzania till he was 18, so he kind of knew what's happening there. He's been going every year since. His nephew standing there next to me, and then a couple from Field Street Baptist. And then from the Tanzania Baptist Association, those fellows there too. So they've gotten a lot of rain there too. We got there, it's the tail end of rainy season. It's lush, it's green. Depending on what part of Tanzania you're in, it's a lot like Brazos Valley. It's just wet. We got around. First town we went to was in Ghana. This is very remote. It's a smaller village. I'm going to say probably 2,000 to 3,000 people in the entire area. It's in the mountains, so that was nice. Temperatures were cool. We hit the ground running the very next morning after we got there. Went out through the jungle into some of the remote areas, and we went hut to hut just teaching them. And what makes it so receptive on their part to tell them the gospel is they're a very oral society. They don't have a lot of books on the shelves that they're reading. It's all stories. They love stories. And so when we go in and the local pastor, who might know them, might not, will just simply ask them, hey, here's an Americani. He's come to see you. I'll tell him God loves him and ask if I can tell him a story. Oh yeah, they'll give you a stool to sit on or something there. And you tell them the story from creation to Christ. And you do it in about 10 minutes and just the highlights. And at the end, he said, I've come all this way. Would you like to trust Jesus? And you'll be amazed at how the Holy Spirit uses that simple method, but that's in a culture that is very oral in their reception. A lot of places. 2.8 billion people in the world have not heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's not that they're going to read it likely. They're going to have to hear it. And that's how you got to do it. You got to tell them the story. So we went through the jungle, made our track, and we would come into some huts and just announce ourselves. You'd have typically 6 to 8 people in the household, all ages. This was on a Saturday, so a lot of them had gone to market, which is in the village. And that's where they're selling their sugar cane, their cassava root, sweet potatoes, watermelons, whatever. They've gone to market. So that was a little bit of a tough one. We end up then having lots of the women that are at the home. The men went to go sell, for the most part. But out of this house, we got some church members, some pastors, and then the local home there. I tried to get a picture of every place I would go. Every place, 1, 2, 3 would receive Christ. I'd have the local pastor lead them in the prayer of salvation. And it was amazing how God works, and that's simple of a presentation. This is a water well out in the jungle there that they had drilled for the community. That's key to getting in and stopping the disease, dysentery that goes on there. Then after that, we would invite them to worship in the afternoon, and that's where there would be the choir. This is what they call a choir. Their term of a choir is a choreography of dancing and singing both. Sometimes they would have music, sometimes it's just a cappella. But yes, this is their church. That's a tent. You remember last fall, heavy windstorms went through, blew most of those tents away. So they've had to rebuild a lot. This particular church was going to lose their space for rent, and so they're looking for another place. In that community, there were people that were walking 16 miles round trip to come worship. Walk. Anybody walk from Cleveland today to come worship this morning? No. That's how serious they are. And they walk everywhere. So there would be a message, preaching, and then Sunday morning we would have worship at another church. I was really thankful for this church. They built it extra high, so they had an airway at the top, and that was very nice. So I had an interpreter. He very good with the gospel presentation, very familiar with it. He would interpret for me. Pastors would then come in and give an invitation and pray over these. These came for receiving Christ at Sunday morning worship service. See the big speakers in the back? Yes, they love their volume. It's so distorted. I'm like, are you afraid the Holy Spirit can't hear you? They like it loud. And even when they pray, they got to have 8 of them praying at the same time, louder than the other guy. I said, so which one of y'all did he not hear? It's crazy. Then they came and they brought me gifts. They bring me sugar cane, raw peanuts, and it was very touching. They've got nothing, and yet they want to bring me something. And I humbly receive it, and thank you. Can't bring it back. So, but I left it with somebody that could use it. And then later that night, Sunday night, you go to worship. This church would come out with banana leaves or whatever kind of leaves they have, and they're just waving them all over the place. They're so excited that we've come to bring the gospel. And it was a great feeling to go in and worship with them. This is what they call the mother church there. So they typically will have about 200 in church service in that tent. They are building a permanent structure for that church. You see they got everything is tent there, and but they are building mud brick building that won't blow away when the windstorms come. These churches were all planted last March. So we've gone back to the same churches, let them know, hey, we haven't abandoned y'all. We're going to bring the message again and again and again, and we're going to part. All out of those 10 plant pastors, 9 of them are still in place. 1 was reassigned to a different district. So they are still in it. Next morning we hit the trails again. These folks were led to Christ. The lady in red and her daughter there to her left. Lots of children, always wide-eyed. They love for you to hear their English. They love to say hi and bye. And they want you to acknowledge it. They won't know what you said back, but they like it. Then the lady that's smiling real big here with the white blouse, she's a believer, and so is her daughter behind her. And her neighbor there in the red was just walking by with her hoe, going to the fields to go work. And she stopped and started listening, and they said, come here. And so they invited her there, and then their friend there standing next to me, they prayed and received Christ that day. Little kids, they're skeptical about getting their picture taken until you turn the camera around. You show it to them, then they smile bigger than you could ever imagine. Why couldn't you do that when I took the picture? They never did. So this was the church I preached at that day. Last year I was there a couple of times. It's called Indoli. It is the only church they have in their system that has walls and a roof. And they're renting it. They don't own it. They rent that. And it was a mill. And it's got a rock floor on the inside. You'll see the rocks there. Put a couple of benches in. They did get doors put on it this year. Last year there were no doors. So they can lock it up. They put bars on the windows on the side. And it takes some getting used to because those are big, huge rocks that you're walking on. They're sharp. But there we would have worship in the afternoon and another message. This young man surrendered to the ministry. His name is Onesimus. Anybody know what book Onesimus was in? Philemon, yes, Philemon. So Onesimus was a slave. And And he surrendered. He is a barber by trade. And he is the church evangelist. So, assistant pastor, so to speak. And this little child, I met her last year, and she started calling me Babu. Babu means grandfather. And so she just started walking around, Babu, Babu, Babu. I got out of the bus this day to walk up, and she comes running up to me, Babu, Babu, Babu. A year later, you can see how young she is. So I picked her up, and I was carrying her and everything. About that time, I kind of felt some rumblings down under and realized they don't have diapers. Interpreter, find this parent. We went to the village the next day and got to pray with some people. There's their kitchen is behind them. You see those sacks? That's rice and beans. That's what they eat. This young man, 5 years ago, was in a horrific accident. Everybody in the accident died. He was the only one who lived. Broke his leg. The doctor said, "You'll survive." Didn't set it, and now he can't walk. He's in his mid-20s. He'll never walk on his own without crutches. He received Christ this day. And it's a steep hill to get down to the church. And the pastor's got a motorcycle, and he's going to go and pick him up every day he wants to come. He stood up there and gave his testimony the day he received Christ there in church. These two, to the right is Agnes, to the left his name is Babu. Babu, I told you, means grandfather. He is named after his grandfather, and so they just call him Babu. Agnes, it was a Saturday last year. She came to the worship service, received Christ, had a baby on her back. That was the first day I was embarrassed and thrown into what happens with nursing mothers in a worship service. She received Christ that day. That was a Saturday. Sunday, we're in the same church leading worship. This little boy, who was probably about a head shorter at that time, comes in and lays down in the sun on that very same mat, in that very same window, at this very same time. He's there. At the end of service, they're asking for prayer. The little boy says, I need prayer. If you'll remember, this was the little boy who came in and had malaria. He was on fire. So, I said, does anybody know this boy? Agnes hadn't been a member of the church and only been saved for 24 hours, says, I know where the boy lives. His mom has left him, and his father doesn't take care of him. I said, you know where he stays then? She said, yeah. The pastor, I said, hey, we got to be at the church. Let's get him to a clinic. It's a Sunday. Is there someplace we can take him? Oh, yeah. So the pastor, Agnes, this boy, and Agnes's baby were on the back of a motorcycle with, like I said, it was going to be $17 and included all medicines for malaria. And the little boy can walk today. He's alive. I'll say, I think the fever might have done some damage to him, but he's a very happy boy. Agnes, on the other hand, went by her hut to visit with her, told her how God used her that day, and God's going to do something special in your life. Agnes then proceeds to tell me she lost her husband less than 60 days ago. A widow in that culture loses everything. The husband's family, they have rights to the entire estate and the children. The woman has no rights. This woman didn't know what she was going to do. We prayed with her. She invited us into her house. She wanted to show us a picture of her husband, introduced us to, of course, she had the baby last year, slightly over a year old now, and a 2-year-old son and a 6-year-old son. Got to meet them. They look like their father, according to the picture. And the house, it was a wreck, mess, not good living conditions. And it was just a sad moment. She's got nothing. On her table was a bowl of those fingerling bananas. They're very sweet. And a jar of flour. And I begin immediately thinking about the widow and Elijah. And she breaks off a bunch of bananas and she hands them to me. I'm like, I can't. But you have to, because it's honoring to them. They know that you're going to pray for me and for my family, and I must give you this. So you take it, and you give them to somebody who needs it. But it's sad. This was a heartbreaking day. So I told you about the worship the night before at that mother church. That night, a woman who was a refugee from Burundi, the country next to Tanzania, came and visited the church that night. I think she might have been one other time. She left her 4-year-old child there to the church that night and walked away. Nobody ever knew where this child was, who it is, where it's from, nothing. The church kept the child that night, figure out what we're going to do the next day. That's tragic. I can't afford to feed another mouth. The church will take care of my child. Here you go. It's happened throughout time. The same afternoon, this afternoon, one of my partners on the team was visiting, stopped by a house, led an older man and his wife to Christ that day, invited them to the 3 o'clock service, and they said, we can't, we're going to bury our 15-year-old son at 4, so we can't. He had a heart disorder, and he died. It was just a tragic, tragic day. There's a book called When Helping Hurts. That was a day that hurt. Mission work is not always feel good. What a great feeling that is. It hurts. It hurts a lot. Because you want to fix these pains, and you can't. But you can lead them to the one who can. who can get them through this. And the church, I implored them, pour into these people. They might not be your members, or they might be your members. Be the church to them. Agnes, there for a year now. She's been faithful to come to that church, and so is the little boy. They're not related, by the way. They were just neighbors. She knew where the boy lived. That was it. Anybody that would receive Christ, we've given some pamphlets to the pastor. A lot of them can't read, but those that could. This is the gospel according to John, Johanna. So it's not a tract. It's actually the book of John, the gospel of John. And then we also brought some Bibles for the pastors. Very few Bibles there, song books, things like that. Bibles there cost 27,000 shillings, which is $10.27. So it doesn't cost a lot. If you get 500, it knocks it down to just under $8. So they're in need of Swahili Bibles. Went on the road again. I'm sick of buses, but it gets pretty packed and tight. Lots of miles, lots of bumps. Saw interesting people, beautiful people. How about doing that job? Walking somewhere, the load on your head, the baby on your back, and your bag in your hand, and complain when the air conditioner doesn't work in the car. Beautiful people. This is a donkey town. Never see a horse there. They're always donkeys. No mules, just donkeys. We came to the next village at Karumwe. Here there were 4 churches. The very first day we were going was for conference. We were going to teach the pastors and pour into them, encourage these pastors. That's what this whole day was about. And we went to this one church to do this, and 2 blocks away from a school. And the school is predominantly Muslim children. This is considered a primary school. So grades 1 through, I'm going to say, 4th, I believe. Anyway, they all come running up because they see the white people. And so they want to touch Leslie's hair. That's fascinating to them, hair. So, and so they all want to touch you and hear my English. And it's really cool. So they said, hey, while we're here, wouldn't that be great if we could go and talk to them? You remember when I went to Romania, I got to go to the school and teach them about creationism. They went to the headmaster of this school. I'm going to say there was probably around 800 students in this school. And they said, would y'all like for us to present a story to the kids? And so they divided us up into 3 teams, and me and my interpreter got to go and had about 200 in my group. And I got to present the gospel to these students. 90% of them were Muslim. Okay, so what they were hearing was new for the first time. They never heard anything like this. They were captivated, they were attentive, and well-behaved, and they heard it. And at the end, invited them to pray the prayer with me. And I don't know the results that came from that. It's kind of hard that you can't do that, but as much latitude as the Holy Spirit would give, I took and trusted that it happened. And so we went then and began our conference, and these are the pastors, some church leaders. We spent the day pouring into them. Then we hit the road again, and rush hour is busy. You see the electric lines back there. Curtis told you several weeks ago about how it was. If you want to know what it was like to live 100 years ago or 200 years ago, just go to Africa. Yeah, those power lines, that don't mean nothing. That gets power from one big city to another big city, but nobody can afford it in between. There are very few drops. A lot of people will have a small solar panel with a wire that goes to a battery, and if they need a light or something like that, or they want to power a satellite for television, they'll do that. It's amazing for entertainment. So this would be the church I'd spend the next 2 days at in their village. It's about like it was last year. This is called Azunia Baptist Church. It's a tent. Went here, and this was a single mother. Her husband had died, and her son received Christ that day. This is Margaret. You remember Margaret last year? I baptized her. She was blind. She wanted to be healed, restore her eyesight. And we had a conversation about how she's doing in her walk, and she's got a great outlook on what Christ is doing in her life. She introduced me to her sister and got to visit with them and led her family to Christ. So Margaret's made a difference right there. We talk about, you plant those seeds and what happens. Discipleship is a replication, and that's the way Jesus had designed discipleship. This is a church member. Rough time, husband's an alcoholic, child is rebellious, said a daughter's rebellious, and another daughter can't get pregnant, which in that society, it's a big deal. Husbands will leave their wives if they cannot have a child for them. So, I prayed for this family, prayed for the rebellious daughter. Little did I know, this daughter was around the corner listening to the whole thing. She came out and I got to just have a good conversation with her. Because she knew Christ, but she had drifted. She had a rebellious heart. I was able to pray with her about that. Then we came to this house. This is a Muslim family. The young man in the red, all three of the older here did receive Christ this day. That young man was laying in a ditch in the shade. I don't think he's from this house. He just knows the people in the area. And he came and he listened. And he gave his heart to Jesus. The other two women, they are Muslim. The one on the right, that's her baby. That baby, I prayed over the baby, dedicate this child to the Lord. This lady is the lady that was freed of demons. She lived a Muslim life. She had them in her. And she came to service that afternoon, but before then, both of those who just received Christ said, hey, let us take you to our neighbors. Immediately. These just received Christ, and we're all going to tell their neighbors what just happened in their house. And so we went and shared the gospel to this family. And then we came back and we had worship in the cornfield underneath the mango tree. And vibrant. So that woman is the one standing in back in the red dress with the gold wrap on her head. And the baby on, that's a different baby. That's not the same newborn. Anyway, yeah. So that'll be a different sermon in the future. We'll talk about spiritual warfare and things of that nature at a different time. This is a mango tree. Eventually they get so big, so old, they stop producing fruit. But they're just so amazing to see. This is Pastor Henry and his wife, Margaret. Very lovely couple. Next day we went out again. This family just butchered a calf. You'll see that black bucket there. That's a leg, hind quarter sticking out with the hoof and the fur still on it. And they were butchering their cattle right there at the place. Meanwhile, we're waiting to present the story. And the little boy just cannot believe, who is this guy looking at me? He's got flies all over him, the rice all over him. They said, I'm not interested. So we left. Stomp the sand off our feet. We go to the next one. It happens. But the pastor can go back. So we went to this family. They received Christ. And then that afternoon, what it was all about, we got to go do baptisms in the lake again. And that day, there were a total of 25 there. And there's that one, she was baptized. As a matter of fact, two that had been set free of demons in their lives were baptized. It was amazing. Then we had Sunday worship. There's another church. Our old church ain't so bad, is it? It's a great building. It's a great place. So is theirs. They worship there, and they don't care. You know, what the Roman Catholics will tell them now, you're not a church. But you see the smile on their faces. They got Jesus in their hearts. So we went back out on the road, took the ferry across the river. This is the leader of the Tanzania Baptist Association, great man. Cattle drives, we passed a lot. Went, spent some time in the safari, Serengeti, elephants and lions. Beautiful scenery. Then came phase 2 of my mission. We went and did some church visiting, pouring into some pastors. These weren't new churches, they were existing. And they had a little bit of an upper hand. They had metal up. They got, it was pretty thin concrete, but they did put some concrete down, as opposed to dirt, because when they get to dancing in those buildings, that dust just flies up. This was through Amigos International, who is our partner at the school at Far Vision. So the signage there, that was a hard one to say. That's Wama Dama Ling Dong. Now, I never could say. This is the Hapa. This is where the crusade would be. We had 4 nights of crusades. The further we got into the bush, you knew it because the roads got narrower. This is a trail. We are driving down this trail. And this is where the crusade was. Open air, out in the middle of a field. Probably how to get malaria from mosquitoes. I had it off on deep and it was on fire. So we got to go to some of the schools. This was a private school. This child, somebody had made